Alright, we're basically finished with part one. So yeah, from now on it'll be a completely different part, which is part two. Uh, in part two is, pretty different compared to part one. Yeah. Wait, give me a second. Alright, so part two is probably the most important part, but also I would also say the part that even I have to improve the most. So I see why people would be confused at like part two. Most people would be confused at. So yeah, part two is probably the hardest part and the part that makes the most people scared. So we need to have a quick preview on part two. So we need to understand how the way you would answer part two first. And first of all, every part two question will give you a cue card. These cue cards would have around four or maybe three questions, and these questions you could rely on them. It is okay, but at the same time, you don't have to rely on them. So if you can think of a better way to answer this question, then don't rely on the cue card. When I did my part two, I started with the cue cards, but then I started to not use it, as the cue cards are not that detailed compared to the other things, compared to the other ideas I could have made. So I just dropped the cue card. But you guys could always use the cue card because they're pretty useful. So yeah. Uh, Anyways, part two is a very, very diverse set of questions. We have, even though there are less forms of questions in part one, you can't just answer them like part one. You have to make a completely different idea. You need to try to describe them the best way you can. You need to try to describe, usually be describing something or someone or a story, usually be some form of that, and you need to try to do that as good as possible, basically. So there isn't any, like, how do I say this? There isn't any actual, there isn't any like actual correct answer again for part two. Basically speaking, doesn't have any correct answer. But yeah, as you can see here, as I've already said, the cue card questions are only recommendations. So if you can think of anything better, or that you just think that these are not good enough, then don't use a cue card. The cue cards are only there for people that are struggling, and that they're only there for, yeah, they're only there if you're really struggling or you need something in a pinch, because you start trying to prepare a part two speech is only 1 single minute. So yeah, there's barely any time you can prepare for your speech, which is kind of annoying. I wanted it to be like 2 minutes. So yeah. Anyways, so a basic part two speech should realistically have four parts. So the first part is you need to start opening the question. You need to explain what it is, and then you go into the depths. So first of all, you need to it's basically like a writing section, a way you would write an essay, but think of a shorter essay, not like a really, really short essay, not like a really, really short essay, but also not a long essay, but just like a type of short essay that you would do for fun, maybe, even, or something, I don't know. But yeah, the first body paragraph, you would probably give around 5 to 7 sentences, and you need to answer questions 2 and 3, or at least, like, yeah, you need to answer questions 2 and 3 on the cue card, and then you need to, give one. We also need to give one type of line that helps you, pass your time. So like a transition sentence. So yeah, This is just and then you go to the next part, which is the second body paragraph. In this second body paragraph, you need to have 5 to 7 sentences again describing the fourth question. The fourth question in cue card, I believe, is probably the most important one, as it is the most specific one, basically. And then the final one, which I believe is kind of important too, and I also do this all the time. Try to think of the future. Try, if you're seeing a person that you admire, what do you want for them to be in your future? If you have an idol, what do you want them to be in your future? Do you still want them to be your idol, or do you want to meet them, or I don't know. It's your choice. If you have your parents as your idol, what do you want? What do you want them to do in the future? Do you want them to help you? Do you want them to, make them feel maybe detach a little bit from you? I don't know. It depends on your opinion. However, this last sentence should be about the future. Alright. So, as you can see, this is a sample sentence, sample of a classic part 2 speech. And as you can see, it is a pretty simple speech. I know it looks a bit long, but basically, what this does is the person broke down what they want to answer. So as you can see, they broke down that I knew them since I knew her for, I think, I'm not sure. No, sorry, him. It's a him. Sorry, my bad. I knew him from grade 6, so that establishes the first question. You need to add a bit more than that. I'm just simplifying what they're trying to say, and then they answered what did the teacher do for them to like him. In this case, they answered that he was a really supportive teacher. So yeah, that's what they did. That was what he did that made the speaker like the teacher. And then now they answer the third part of the cue card, which is to explain how this person influenced you a lot to do better in life. And basically, they talked about how they used him as a role model, and that they thought of him whenever for the things that they have been doing, etc. So yeah, basically they answered all of the questions properly with good ways of saying why. You need to describe why as well, and it gets the idea out properly. So yeah. So some of these words you probably want to know. So the ones that I would probably remember, I think you guys should probably know, are dedicated, get the hang of something, and role model, and maybe and determination. Because, and probably learn by heart, but yeah. Because these words are going to be commonly used in part 2. So these words are not just actually used in this part only, but like words like role model are going to be used in part 2 as a whole, because they will force you to describe something usually, or tell them a story, and usually these words pair really well with what they want to say, what they want to give us. So yeah, remember some of these words, please. So yeah. All right. So, now let's break down this part first. So, the first part they will ask us from the cue card. It will be usually the form what is it and who is it. Now, this is for the kinds of questions that want you to describe a specific person, and or a specific thing, or a specific whatever. It really depends on the question, but usually wants you to describe something. So yeah, so with the first, you need to answer what and who is it, as you can see, and then you need to like introduce them to the examiner, and you need to describe them as what. So you need to say, oh, well, I want to share with you, or talk about, or I want to tell you, whatever. And then you would say which or who, depending on the thing again. So yeah, pretty simple. You just need to describe. You just need to describe the basics, like that. Give me a second. All right. All right. Sorry. All right. So yeah. So you just need to describe the person, and then you describe what they did to you that made them the reason why you made your speech. So for example, right, we have the beginning of part two. Describe a person who has influenced you to do better in your life. Now we're gonna take yeah, you need to, as you can see, you use, oh, I'm going to introduce this person, which or who has been, etc., etc. As you can see, as long as you answer, for example, the thing first, and then the reason as to why, then you could probably easily answer this. So, would anybody like to create a form of this? Would anyone like to introduce something that they want to say? Anything. Just anything. Please raise your hand or turn on your mic if you want to know. Anyone? Would anybody like to use this sentence structure, please? Anyone? Alright, since I see no one, I'll just continue. Yeah, guys, I know today's class is slightly smaller than last time, but we need to be more active. Thank you. Alright, so, so, yeah, we are going to continue. Now, basically, they're going to basically ask you some of these questions in the cue cards. When, where, who, how often. And you need to try to tell them a story, okay? Um, all and the best way. Yes, I fall.
Oh, like, okay, so we're talking about like the question is like, uh, wait, what's the question again? I was like, what is the question again? Excuse me.
The question that I asked before. Would you like to tell us anything that you like under the sentence structure? Is that what you mean?
Okay, so yeah, so I want to share with you one thing that I really uh like and that thing that person has inspired me. So that is a famous YouTuber called Vortrox, and he inspired me to like get in the YouTube, like to YouTube.
Oh, all right. Yeah, so that is a pretty good example.
Mm.
You did describe a YouTuber, which is a who. Yeah, and you did describe how he got you in YouTube, which would be a good one if the question asked you something about getting into something. If I remember correctly, he's a Geometry Dash YouTuber. I'm not sure, but yeah. Anyways, I'll continue. So, yeah. Alright, so yeah, but that's basically what you would do. You would try to, you need to try to describe using these questions here. And yeah, again, you should try to tell them a story. You should also describe the person, yes, but you while telling the person, you also need to tell them the story as well. Yeah, so that's basically it. You would describe them via a story. So for example, if I had somebody that I liked, right? I would tell maybe how I met them as a story, or maybe an experience with them as a story, and I will try to give the examiner hints of what the person could be like over time, to give people more of a sense, to give the examiner give you more points, because stories usually earn more points. So yeah, that's probably a really really good way to get points. Wait, give me a second. Sorry. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a really good way to get more points. So, um, basically, it's also a better way to get like way more, way to get your writing, no, your speaking way more clear. And you also want to speak from the past and then to the present. So you need to describe all what you did with them, and then now what you are. So yeah, that's basically it. So yeah, that's basically it. Um, so continuing on. Basically, there are two basics of how you would answer the type when. Now let's have a look. Okay, the first type of when is, well, this happened. The first situation of when is that, oh, this happened in the past. Most of the time, it's probably gonna be in the past. So I did this at some time ago. I did this at whatever grade, etc. So basically, basic words that would describe to you your current situation. All right. So yeah. So when I was in sixth grade, for example, I got into learning English for the first time. That might be something that they use in there, that you could use as well. So yeah, that is a pretty basic way of saying when. Now, there is also another case actually, which is the situation happens in the future. It happens in the future. Now, what do I mean by this? Basically, you're planning to do something, but you haven't done it yet. So this is a pretty weird one, but it does actually work if and only if you actually do it right. And most of the time, I would suggest for you to do the first one. However, if you have a really interesting second one, then you could actually do the futures one, because the futures one is really interesting to the examiner. I think actually in my exam, I did a rather more futuristic one. So yeah, so yeah, a when is really optional. Try doing the past, but if you can, do futures. All right. So now, the next question they would ask is where. Now, most of the time, they would ask where that place is, or where you learned from them. Um, so yeah, that is the where type question. It is pretty easy to answer. Just say, well, it's probably around sometime a ride from home, or some basic way of saying. Just don't say the address or something. Just give them an approximate, a few kilometers from my house, close to the city center. Those really subjective, really relative type words would be perfect perfect for the where part. Now, pretty simple. There's nothing much. You shouldn't really struggle with this. If you struggle with this, I don't know why you're here, but like, don't struggle with this. This is probably the easiest one. Now, who? Again, really, really simple question. Who did you do this with? Who did you do this action with in the story? In a story, either it's a solo story with one person or many people. Usually in IELTS speaking, you would want a story with two people because that's probably what you're going to describe a person. And you need to describe the person, of course, who that person is, because that's the entire point of probably some of these questions. Alright, so yeah. So for example, it was my sister who bought this coat for me on my birthday, which is, well, yeah, that's how you get that's what your sister bought for you, and it tells us who bought it for you, basically. Really simple. Now, the final question they would ask for you is how often. Now, how often is slightly harder, but again, it's something relative. Okay, yeah, how often is pretty relative because it just you can just say, oh, I do this once per month, I do this once per week. It depends, etc. It depends on the situation. So yeah, basically, a lot of this is the how often question is actually pretty relevant to some of the parts in part one. So yeah, you should probably remember part one too, because some of the part one things are pretty useful too. So yeah, so let's continue with yeah. So that's with how often. Now, here is a simple. Here is some of the words we use. Actually, go shopping for clothes once in a blue moon, which means, well, I rarely shop. I actually don't, maybe not even shop at all. Once in a blue moon means pretty rarely. So yeah, that is one term I would say you probably could use in your exam. But yeah. Now, as you can see, this is a simple part two answer. Sorry, it's a simple story, a little bit, where they describe how they got the code and what they used the code for, etc., etc. The answer when, how often, who, and where. Which is, again, that's not everything that you would want, but that is still made a huge part of all the things that we would expect from a IELTS speaking part. So yeah, try to answer like that. Does anybody have any questions till now, or shall I continue? Alright. If I see none, then I'll just continue. Alright. Alright. So, now, the next one is you answer under the cue card. So, yeah. The first one you made is make a story that describes it, which is, in my opinion, the superior one, because it is way more interesting to hear as somebody that isn't an examiner but knows a bit of what the examiners expect from you. They really want you to hear a story, and for the many times that I've done speaking part two, I have only done a story and not a description. Stories are really interesting, so huge reminder to do them if you can. But it's okay if you don't. They just want to see you. They just want to see you answer properly. But if you have an interesting way to answer, that is a W on your side. Make sure to do that. So yeah. Anyways, so you need to, if you were to answer from the cue card, you need to directly answer to it. They wouldn't answer, oh, why did you do this? How did you feel about it? So yeah, you need to answer why and how. So you need to, first of all, you need to give out the topic sentence, of course, and you need to do, oh, I have something I am for or because of some reasons, or I felt something about about something for some reason. So basically, describe your feelings. Basically, just if you're do you like it or did you not like it or what? It depends on your feelings. Again, this is a really open-ended question. You just need to give it in a way where the examiner perfectly understands it. So yeah, we'll continue. For the first two to the three, you need to give out. So you say firstly or first of all, or something like that. Does that you need to give out some reasons? Needs of course. Okay, you need to, and then you give out more reasons. And yeah, basically you just add more and more reasons. Yeah, but again, please try to keep it at two and three. Just don't make too many reasons, as it will clog up your speech, and you only have a 2 minute time period. So, and that actually, for me, that isn't too much, but that might be a lot for you. But still, 2 or 3 is like the perfect amount. So yeah. Now, 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 what about how? Now, as you can see, this is how they answered the word how. Now, as you can see, this is how this person has influenced to do better in their life. So, for example, he nurtured their passion for English, and he described why. Yeah, and then they said the second reason, which is to take action from him. And well, you described them a lot. They described him as well a teacher that helped them really much. So yeah, you basically just need to do that, not that hard. Um, so yeah, as long as you know how to make decent ideas and you know how to give a really decent way, you give them a decent way, then like you make a really decent elaboration of the idea, then it will be great. Yeah, that will really help you. Now, finally, why? You need to for this one, describe why. As you can see, they described, oh, why they like the coat. Well, the coat is waterproof, and also it's really handy. And they describe why it's handy and why being waterproof is great. So after all in all, what you want to do is you need to give your idea, your main idea, and then you describe why. No, then you elaborate upon it. You need to give more upon it, so that yeah, it's actually way better. Sound way better. So yeah, we have another why example. As you can see, they said, oh, they like buying books from Amazon because first of all, it's convenient, and as you can see, they said why it's convenient, and second of all, they said it's cheap, and yeah, they describe why it's cheap. So yeah, that's a really simple way of doing it. You don't really have to stress that much doing this part. You just need to play it off and like be really chill. I don't know what to say on this part. Just that, yeah. Anyways, let's continue. Alright. So, if you want to end a part 2, you would realistically want to answer I wish or I hope I will do something. You always want to look positively to the future. Regardless, you will always want to look at the future in a positive light. Oh, I want to be. Yeah, I want to be in the future. Oh, the future will be great. Something like that. Not exactly like that. That would be very terrible. But just make it seem positive or negative if you hate them. But most of the time, make it seem positive. So yeah,
Teacher,
yeah.
can you after the lesson can you send us the link of this this IELTS so I can read it again?
Yeah, I'll send it after this course ends. But yeah, good question. Thank you. Any more questions? All right. We shall continue. So yeah. All right. So now you need to end your speech with that, as we said, And then you need to, yeah, that's really it. You need to, wait, give me a second. Give me a second. All right. So, yeah. Need to describe that your speech is over, and need to give it and you need to give them a positive expectation of you, especially in part 2. Basically, just make yourself look positive. Again, positivity is really the best way in here. Positivity is something that you need to prioritize, as they also are looking for some sort of that in your speeches. Yeah, and then and then you need to speak it. You need to speak in what was it again? Give me a second. You need to yeah, basically just try to you need to try and speak in the future. I forgot the tense term. My bad. Yeah. All right. The way you need to learn speaking part 2 is pretty how do I say this? Different, I think. That would be a good word. Basically, the best way you need to learn is you need to basically recycle the ideas from your from model answers. So, for example, first of all, you need to try and separate all these into groups. All of these will be descriptions, I've already said, or you can tell a story. Now, there will probably be 3 main ones. The first one is a person. The second one is a specific item, and the final one is a place. It will probably fall under these 3 categories. These 3 categories, because I went through many practice exams, and all of the questions there are basically just fall under all of these 3 categories. It's just these 3 categories. That's really it. There's nothing much. So yeah, we will be continuing to the next part, which is about which is you need to give a sample answer for the 3 questions. So, for example, you should give a sample answer to a person you admire, who the person is, how long you've known them, how they are, and what quality they have. Try to make a sample answer, and once you have this sample answer like this, then basically you need to try and learn of these questions, and you need to recycle these ideas. And yeah, you need to recycle these ideas, and you need to recycle these words that you learned from these sample answers. And that is basically it for if you want to learn part 2. So, for example, the intelligent person you know, describe that person when you first met them, and yeah, that's really it. There isn't much you could really try and do here. So yeah. Anyways. Let's continue. Yeah. As you can see, this is they have basically recycled this entire thing, but the only thing is that they changed a few things. That's really it. So yeah. Alright. Yeah, let's continue. Basically, basically just try to recycle stuff. That's the best way. Now, we are finally going to go for part 2 and the types. So, type 1 is describe a person. So, now let's talk a bit about describe a person. Usually, you would want to say, well, you need to start up describe a person. You need to say, I'm going to talk about somebody who is whatever, blah blah blah. Yeah, and then you need to give a first body paragraph. You need to give some basic information about this person, how you knew that person, what they look like, etc. And then the second part, you need to give any ideas. No, sorry, give any like, just yeah. In general, just try to answer what kind of person they are. So yeah, and then finally you answer how you feel. So yeah, this is a basic baseline that you would use for part two. On part two, describe a person. But yeah, um, as you can see, the first part, part one, let's go a bit deeper. So you would give some basic information with the person. The first thing you need to give is themselves. Need to give where they sorry, their name, their age, maybe their job, you where they live, but be clear, don't drop their entire address. Just give like a relative place, like a city, okay? Just don't be too specific. That's not good. With who,